The trial wasn't a test, it was a warning. Every cadet in the academy knew the stories. The labyrinth that shifted like a living thing, the predators released inside, the screams that echoed for hours before going silent. No one survived. No one was meant to. The trial existed to break pride, to remind even the strongest that fear always wins. So when the instructor called his name, the hall erupted in laughter. A human? He'll last minutes. He'll never even see the first turn. Soft skin tears fastest. He didn't answer. He only rose from his seat, calm, his boots echoing against the stone as he walked down toward the gate. The cadets leaned forward, jeering, eager for the spectacle of his death. The gate loomed tall, its steel blackened with old blood. A guard shoved a knife into his hand of tradition, not mercy. Then the doors yawned open, darkness swallowing the light. For a moment he hesitated, and the cadets smirked, already imagining his panic. But then he stepped forward, shoulders square, a faint curve at his lips. The doors slammed behind him, sealing the labyrinth shut. The sound of silence pressed down. Then, from somewhere ahead, a growl rumbled low and hungry. Something shifted in the dark claws dragging across metal, jaws clicking with anticipation. His pulse quickened, but he didn't run. He tightened his grip on the knife, bare feet steady against the cold floor. And when the first roar shattered the silence, he smiled. And it's doing it. All of that. Daniel Hayes had trained for this. Not the trial specifically, because no one could train for that, but for the unknown, for survival, for pain. He hadn't grown up on a war world or hunted lizards with plasma rifles like some of the others, but he had spent hours in Arctic training zones, learned how to pace himself through hypoxia, endured jungle rot and frostbite. He knew how to suffer and keep moving. The air inside the labyrinth was damp, metallic, and thick with rot. Every breath tasted like wet rust and mold. He moved carefully, keeping his profile low, the knife angled up and tight against his forearm. The floor beneath his feet wasn't quite level. Some sections dipped with his weight, others echoed like they were hollow. The trial's AI was said to adapt its internal geometry based on cadet responses. The faster you ran, the more it closed off escape routes. The more you tried to fight, the more aggressive predators it spawned. It watched for panic. It fed on it. A hiss echoed above him, high and thin. Daniel paused beneath a junction where pipes clattered against one another. He adjusted his breathing, focusing on slowing his heart rate. The knife they'd given him was just under 7 inches long, single edge, full tang. It was sharp, but not new. The handle had been rewrapped more than once. The grip was worn smooth with the sweat of other hands, maybe even blood. He didn't know if it was symbolic or if there was something statistical to it. Maybe the academy thought one knife was enough to make you feel like you had a chance. He kept moving. The first sign of a predator wasn't a roar. It was the sudden drop in background noise. The ventilation hum stuttered. The low static flicker of emergency lights dimmed. Then a wet scrape rolled through the corridor, like a dragging weight across sheet metal. It was behind him. It wasn't trying to be quiet. He didn't look back. Daniel sprinted toward a crossway where one passage sloped upward. The labyrinth didn't follow Earth physics. Some of it curved at impossible angles, but this tunnel was old-school infrastructure. Steel ladders, metal hatches, access panels half hanging open. He spotted a collapsed beam ahead, jagged at one end where it had punched through the wall. When the creature lunged, it was through a side pipe big enough to hold a grown man. It came fast, low, a blur of sinew and teeth and iridescent muscle. Daniel dropped and rolled toward the collapsed beam. The creature overshot, skidded on the slick floor, and rammed the wall hard enough to shake dust loose. He scrambled behind the beam. His left hand was bleeding from the roll, palm sliced by broken rebar. He gritted his teeth and pulled a section of pipe free from the debris, just long enough to use as leverage. He used it to pin the predator's snout to the ground when it came again. Its claws dug into the metal with a sound that made Daniel's teeth hurt. He used the knife like a spike, slamming it down just behind the creature's eye ridge. It didn't go cleanly. The angle was bad. The skin resisted, and he had to press with both hands, weight behind it, until the blade sank deep enough to stop the twitching. When it went still, he stayed over it, panting. The knife was slick with blood, which steamed faintly in the cold air. Daniel backed away. His left hand hurt more now that adrenaline was fading. He unzipped the sleeve of his uniform and tore a strip from the inner lining, wrapping it tightly around the palm. The bleeding slowed. He tested the grip. Weak, but usable. He'd need to irrigate the wound later. If it stayed dirty, infection would set in fast. Probably 24 hours before signs started. 48 if he was lucky. But that was one down. He marked the wall beside the body with a vertical line of blood. One. Then he moved on. And was a lot of the stage, and if it excessed of the cost, the wait, and with a ride, and remitted it was a last. Hours passed, though time was strange in the labyrinth. The lighting wasn't consistent. Some sections blinked between dim red and blinding white. Others were pitch dark until he entered, then lit slowly, like an eye dilating in reverse. Daniel found a food ration stashed in a ventilation shaft, old, wrapped in foil. He chewed it slowly, listening. His feet ached. He'd been barefoot since entering, and the floor was rarely smooth. He stepped around jagged edges and broken grates. His soles were torn in 2 places, but he didn't stop. He limped, lightly, favoring the ball of his right foot. He wasn't fast, but he was still moving. The AI shifted the corridors twice while he was inside a maintenance duct. He waited both times, letting the grinding of the walls pass before moving. The second time, it trapped a predator in the next hall over. He heard it trying to push through the paneling, growling with rage. Daniel smiled, just briefly. He carved another mark on the wall. 2. The second kill had come after he lured a stalker-type predator into a gravity sink zone. He used a broken security drone's lens to reflect light and confuse its vision, then led it across a loose floor panel. It dropped, twisted its forelimb on impact, and couldn't climb fast enough. His knife went into the soft spot under its ribcage. The thing bled out in a hiss of gas and plasma-colored fluid. His hands were shaking by then. His ribs were bruised, maybe cracked. He took a break, pressing his back to the wall, breathing slow. He counted 60 seconds before rising again. Pain meant he was still alive. And he was beginning to notice a pattern. The predators didn't adapt. They were designed to intimidate, ambush, charge. But they weren't thinkers. The AI, though, it was watching him differently now. Lights changed when he entered. Wall shifts delayed by a few seconds. It was like the labyrinth wasn't sure anymore. He grinned, just faintly, then wiped the blood from his knife and kept going. He wasn't the prey anymore. He was learning the maze, and he was still alive. The fourth corridor bled light from the ceiling. Daniel shielded his eyes with one hand as he stepped over the mangled remains of what might have once been a security turret. Its barrel was fused, slagged from overheating, and its sensor core flickered like it was trying to remember what it used to be. He moved quietly, now more out of strategy than fear. The trial had started with a roar, but now it whispered. The AI was paying attention. It had begun to experiment. Earlier, it had sealed him into a low-humidity zone where static electricity built with every step. The air there sparked off his skin, and something he hadn't seen, it tried to use the charge to track his position. He'd ended that by wrapping his feet in a torn blanket pulled from a collapsed medical station. It reduced the charge. Not entirely, but enough. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. His body wanted rest, his right thigh was cramping regularly now, and the tendons behind his knee kept twitching, but his mind was sharp. His body would catch up later, or it wouldn't. He made a sling from some cable and duct tape, scavenged off a cracked panel. His left arm was swollen and angry, the palm stiff from coagulation and pulsing with dull heat. He knew the signs. Infection was setting in. Localized cellulitis, maybe. No streaking yet, so the deeper tissue was still clear. For now, Daniel gritted his teeth as he tested grip strength. About 30%. No fine motor control. He adjusted how he held the knife. His right hand would carry the fight now. The next predator didn't stalk. It charged. The labyrinth had grown bolder, less subtle. The AI had realized he wasn't dying fast enough, so it turned to overwhelming force. It dropped him into a weapons-testing arena. Ancient, unused. Blast scoring lined the walls, and the lights were spotty. A massive shape surged from a sealed vault as he crossed the center line. He barely dove in time. The creature was plated in dark gray bone, joints layered with cartilage that hissed when it moved. Its eyes glowed pale yellow, and its jaw could have swallowed a man whole. But what caught Daniel's attention were the scars. Old ones, deep. This thing had been tested before. He didn't try to fight it head on, he ran. He counted the seconds between its steps. 12 to the wall, 4 to turn, 6 to start charging again. It was fast, but not agile. He led it in a circle, kicking loose a pile of ammo crates to block the secondary path. The crates slowed it enough to wedge it into a support column. It bucked, thrashed, roared, and Daniel jumped from above. The knife went in near the base of the skull, but the blade cracked. He heard it break. Only the lower half remained embedded in the wound, as the beast slammed itself into the wall and convulsed, tail whipping into the air. One blow clipped him in the chest. Hard. He flew. He hit the floor sideways, slid across loose metal, and rolled until the wall stopped him. His vision swam. He gasped and coughed. Pain flooded in, deep chest ache, worse on the right. He pressed his hand there and hissed. The ribs were definitely broken. Not displaced, not puncturing anything yet, but at least one had cracked, maybe two. He didn't try to get up immediately. He stayed down, eyes open, counting slow breaths, testing for bubbling, for blood in his throat. None. It hurt to breathe deep, so he didn't. When he stood again, it was with his back braced against the wall and a length of metal pipe in his grip. The predator was twitching, but not moving. He'd won. Barely. His boots, soaked with the creature's blood, squeaked as he limped away. As a Protion, and Rapsor, as a PO. Outside, the surveillance feeds flickered. The AI projected fragmented imagery to the viewing room, flashes of movement, sound stripped of context. One moment, static. Then a burst of screaming not human cut off midway. Then silence. Always silence. The other cadets had stopped mocking. They leaned closer to the glass, alien eyes wide, breath held. He should be dead. He has no weapons. Send the drones, end the simulation. But the instructors said nothing. They knew the rules. Once inside, the labyrinth was in control. No interference. Only the trial decided who came out. As a Protion, and native of the Boar. By raiding back to, Daniel stumbled through a narrow corridor, lit with soft green pulses. The wall shimmered slightly under his hand. He was close to the core now. He could feel it. The predators were changing. Less instinct, more strategy. The last one had tried to feint. It had faked a limp, drawn him in with whimpers. When he circled behind it, it snapped. He only survived because the creature's rear leg had been partially amputated surgical, old maybe from a prior fight. Daniel didn't kill that one. He locked it in a shaft, using a broken door mechanism and a chain of crushed helmets. The AI watched him improvise. He could feel it. It sent no beast for a while. Just maze. He wandered halls that led nowhere. Looped corridors, rooms with flickering lights and old human graffiti scrawled in languages from a dozen worlds. Some of it was just gibberish, but some was in English. He stopped at one. Scrawled in thick grease pencil across a broken screen. It never ends, but it learns. Beneath that, a single name, barely visible. Marcus Decker, a cadet who had entered the trial 6 years ago. No one had ever returned. Until now. Daniel's hand trembled as he touched the name. He let himself feel it. Grief, maybe. Solidarity. And then he moved on. He wasn't done. By the stand, he revived the profling. The AI adapted again. The next room was submerged. A sewage treatment sub-level, flooded knee-deep in brackish gray water. The smell alone turned his stomach. But the sound was worse. Water carries vibrations. Every step echoed. He crouched, moved slowly. The pipe he carried now was sharpened at one end, scraped against the floor for psychological effect. His, or the AI's, he couldn't tell. The water shifted ahead. He froze. Then again, to the left. He stepped back. And the creature exploded out of the water behind him. This one didn't charge. It coiled, tentacled, silent. A blind hunter, sensing waves. It wrapped around his legs, pulling. He fought the panic. Don't thrash, don't scream. He exhaled slowly, shifted his weight, then drove the pipe downward into what felt like muscle. The creature flinched, gave a gurgling hiss. Daniel dropped flat, submerged fully. Murky liquid filled his ears, mouth. He twisted, jammed the pipe deeper. Something gave. The tentacle loosened. He kicked free, surfaced coughing, gagging. He spat water, bile, and blood. It didn't try again. Whatever it was, it had learned too. He waded out, dripping, breath ragged. The infection in his hand had worsened. Red streaks crept up his forearm now. He'd need antibiotics. Soon. But he wasn't dead. Not yet. He dragged himself into a supply alcove and collapsed against a crate. He peeled off his boot. The left foot was torn, blistered, bleeding through 3 layers of sock. The heel had split, skin peeled. He disinfected with alcohol gel from a shattered med pack. The scream echoed, sharp and fast. He bit down on the collar of his uniform to muffle it. Then he laced the boot again, tighter this time. Pain would come later. For now, he had to move. The trial wasn't done with him. And he wasn't done with it. Daniel hadn't heard his own heartbeat for some time. It had disappeared into the background, replaced by the subtle rhythms of the labyrinth. The hum of energy through panels, the faint hydraulic hiss before walls shifted, the distant snarl of something fed just enough to hunt, but not enough to be sated. The trial was quiet now, not because it had finished, because it was thinking. The AI had gone from indifferent to observant. Its challenges no longer felt procedural, they felt personal. He found a room filled with mirrors, not for vanity, but disorientation. Reflections bent at off angles, bouncing light and motion in every direction. A predator moved within, stalking him through the glass. It didn't rush, it waited for confusion. Daniel stayed low, his body pulsing with aches. His right knee had stiffened overnight, not a sprain, but swelling from overuse. The skin was red and tight over the patella. He'd seen it before, in mountain survival drills bursitis. He'd have to drain it later, carefully. He couldn't afford infection in 2 limbs. He watched the mirrors. A flicker, a footstep. The real one was always just a second behind its reflection. He dropped suddenly and swung his broken blade, the half that still remained, across the floor. It hit something soft, then resistance. Blood sprayed against the mirrored glass. The image shimmered and collapsed. The predator wasn't armored, fast, smart, but not built for a finishing fight. It bled and died, twitching, claws twitching against the floor. Daniel didn't wait. He limped to the corner, dug into the corpse's pouch, a synthetic sack bound to its shoulder. Inside was a gelatinous ration block, not for him, but for the beast. He chewed half anyway, gagging on the taste, and wrapped the rest in a strip of fabric for later. Calories mattered more than pride. He marked the wall with a smear of its blood. 5. Asked a DDO, is the fading his friend of the tenant? The next room tried to manipulate him emotionally. A projection. Earth. Not realistic. Not quite. The air smelled too clean. The grass shimmered like plastic. The sky overhead was cracked open with faint grid lines. He knew it wasn't real. The labyrinth didn't hide its tricks well, but the bench in the middle was tempting. So was the warmth. His body was shutting down. Dehydrated, fevered, limping. His arm had started to shake even at rest. He walked through the room anyway, straight across. Never looked at the bench, didn't stop to touch the grass. As he crossed the halfway point, the illusion shattered. The sky fractured and fell like glass. The warmth turned to biting cold. Walls surged inward. But he was already moving. The room crushed inward with a metallic scream, jaws of steel grinding toward the center. He dove through the exit as the passage behind him sealed with a final choking slam. He lay still on the floor outside, panting. His breath came in short, dry gasps. His tongue was sticking to his teeth. He needed water. When he looked up, the AI had left him a choice. 2 paths. One lit, one dark. He chose the dark. Acerlastered exome. What? Begover. He found water in a backup coolant tank. Not drinkable raw, but nearby he spotted a solar still broken, but the condenser coil was intact. He collected the coolant, filtered it twice through improvised mesh, then boiled it over a heating coil wired to a salvaged power cell. It took 2 hours. He waited. He could have moved on, but dehydration would kill him faster than any beast. When the water finally cooled, he drank it slow. Small sips. His stomach cramped, protesting the sudden influx, but he ignored it. The shaking in his arm lessened. He rested another hour, stripping his foot to inspect the heel. It had cracked deeper. The tissue was gray at the edges, almost necrotic. He used a sterilized shard of glass to excise the worst sections, cleaning the wound again with alcohol and rewrapping it in clean cloth torn from the creature's ration pouch. He screamed once, then bit down on his own fist. Then he kept going. As at no people. Outside, the cadets had stopped watching the screen. Some had left. Others stood in hushed clusters, whispering. He's still alive. No, it has to be footage delay. It's been nearly 2 days. But the timestamp in the corner of the feed was current. The instructors didn't speak. They didn't shift. Their eyes were locked on the flickering screen, watching as Daniel Hayes, bleeding, limping, filthy with gore, still moved. Not hiding, not begging, fighting. As at no people. The next trap was intellectual. He entered a central control room, long abandoned. Screens flickered. Data in alien scripts scrolled across panels. One of the doors began to hiss. A predator would enter in exactly 60 seconds. On the console was a puzzle. An override. 5 buttons, 4 screens, symbols shifting. The AI had fed him a code. If he solved it, the door would seal. If not, the beast would enter. Daniel had never seen these symbols, but their spacing, their syntax, told a story. He traced repetition, frequency, pattern. He pressed the 4th button. Nothing happened. He pressed the 2nd. A chime. The lights changed. He pressed the 5th. The door began to seal. Then it stopped. The puzzle reset. 30 seconds. He cursed. Moved faster. 2nd, 3rd, 4th. Click. The door stayed open. 15 seconds. He stared, breathing hard. Then he saw the sequence was recursive. It wasn't about the symbols. It was about rhythm. The AI was testing cognition under duress. He pressed the sequence again, but with intervals of 3 seconds each. The door hissed, groaned, then sealed. A mechanical voice echoed. Cognitive challenge passed. He sagged into a seat, hands shaking. That had been the easiest room so far. And then down relieved Deposov. The final challenge of the cycle wasn't a beast. It was silence. A room with no light, no sound, no temperature change. It disoriented him instantly. He couldn't tell up from down. No walls, no floor, just weightless silence. He drifted. Then came the voices. From his past, from his fear. You're not made for this. They'll never respect you. You're going to die in the dark. He knew it wasn't real, but it didn't matter. His heartbeat spiked. His vision blurred. He curled into a ball, dug his fingers into his scalp, and screamed. Then he stood. And walked. Straight line, as steady as he could. His steps echoed, then became real. The room fell away. He emerged into light. And the trial sent something real. One of the beasts from earlier, larger now, upgraded, armored. But Daniel didn't stop. He lifted the sharpened pipe. His heel was cracked open. His ribs were broken. His skin was on fire with fever. But his eyes were clear. He struck before it moved. He didn't win clean. He nearly died. The beast crushed him against the wall, but he didn't drop the pipe. He drove it under the creature's jaw, turned it, jammed it through soft tissue. His shoulder dislocated in the process. He felt the ligaments tear. But the beast collapsed, twitching, dead. He fell beside it, groaning. He'd torn muscles in his back. His shoulder needed to be reset. He couldn't do that without painkillers. He'd rest, just for a minute. He lay in its blood, breathing. And then he laughed. Just once. Sharp. Real. They should have sent more. The blood had soaked into the seams of his boots. Every step now left a red footprint behind him, tracking his movement like a reverse hunt. He didn't wipe them clean. Let the AI follow if it wanted. Let it watch. Daniel's shoulder had swollen badly since the last kill. It was visibly out of socket. The deltoid was tight, the joint protruding slightly forward, classic anterior dislocation. Any movement of the upper arm sent a bolt of pain straight into his neck and down through his chest. He couldn't reset it one-handed. He'd tried. Couldn't wedge the elbow into the wall right. Couldn't generate enough force with his other arm. But he'd found an old auto-splint locker in a disused maintenance chamber. Useless for resetting, but it gave him a compression wrap and a limited rotation arm harness. It locked the shoulder into position, reduced the chance of nerve compression, and kept the arm still enough that he could move without blacking out. Mostly. He walked with his knife in his left hand now, not because it was stronger, but because it wasn't dislocated. The blade was duller than ever. He'd tried sharpening it against vent grating, but the steel was old. Pitted, it didn't hold the edge. Still, it was better than nothing. His breathing was shallow. He'd stopped trying to take full breaths about 5 hours ago. He wasn't coughing blood, but the crackling sound under his ribs was louder. If he had to guess, at least one of them was partially displaced now. Not puncturing the lung, not yet, but flirting with it. He walked slower. But he was still walking. And the less, as an oldie face, as an own, and C8. Outside the trial chamber, the observation deck was packed now. Instructors from other academies had arrived. Senior evaluators. Even a few war veterans commanders who'd once spoken of the trial as legend. The footage was unstable, but consistent enough now to track his path. One of the techs was trying to overlay a movement map across the labyrinth's schematics. It didn't work. The maze had reshaped too many times. No two sections remained static longer than an hour. Every path twisted. Every kill zone moved. But somehow, Daniel had managed to remain within a narrow vector of forward motion, not circling, not retreating. Is he heading for the core? He can't know where it is. But he does. The instructors didn't speak. They watched. And, for the first time in the trial's recorded history, someone activated the fail-safe tablet. Not to stop the test. To prepare the medbay, because he might actually make it out. And the Redded Shrokos. The final section of the labyrinth was unlike anything before. It wasn't dirty. It was clean. White walls. Sterile lighting, glass panels that stretched from floor to ceiling, no rust, no bloodstains, no bone piles. The AI had changed strategy. Now it wanted to talk. As he entered the hall, a screen flickered on. Not video. Text. You are injured. Sit. A platform emerged from the wall, soft, cushioned. He ignored it. Another line appeared. You cannot defeat the next one. Daniel stared at the screen, his face blank. You are limping. Fever 102.3. One lung partially collapsed. Left hand infected. Right shoulder dislocated. Knife compromised. Heart rate irregular. Heart? He smiled. Not because it was wrong, but because it was right. It knew everything. It had been watching since the first step. Another message. Final predator preparing. You will die. Sit. He spoke then, voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. Let's finish. The door opened. And the Redded Shrokos. In the Redditch, the chamber was wide, circular, dome-ceilinged. The beast waited at the far end. It wasn't rushing. It wasn't even breathing hard. The thing stood twice his height, armored from shoulder to hip, eyes narrow and calm, not feral, not desperate. It wasn't a brute. It was a killer. And it knew what it was doing. Daniel took one step in. The door sealed behind him. The beast flexed its claws. He adjusted his stance. He couldn't run. His knee wouldn't allow it. He couldn't throw. His shoulder wouldn't allow that either. So he did what humans have done for thousands of years when outmatched. He made himself impossible to predict. The fight wasn't elegant. It was ugly, grinding. Daniel used the walls. He baited the beast into overcommitting. He rolled beneath a charging lunge and smashed his knee against the support rail doing it. Pain tore up his leg. He screamed, fell, rolled. The beast came down hard. Daniel struck it once in the throat, the only unarmored place. The knife didn't go in all the way. But it tore. The creature reared back. Blood sprayed. It still wasn't dead. It slammed him once open-palmed across the torso. He heard a rib break, maybe two. His vision blackened, his body went limp. But he kept moving. He crawled. dragged himself to the shattered edge of a support column, and ripped off a shard of alloyed steel. As the beast came for him again, he stood. It was the last burst of energy he had. He stood, twisted, and drove the metal shard into its lower jaw, up through the roof of the mouth and into the skull. It spasmed, jerked, fell, and didn't rise. Daniel collapsed beside it, barely breathing. Then the lights changed. Green. And a voice, real this time. External, instructor level. Trial complete. Aid in a mast of the prive. All the fast of the ponetcy. The doors opened 8 minutes later. Everyone was there. Cadets, instructors, officers. No one spoke. Then a figure appeared in the archway. Hair wild, uniform torn, boots dripping red. Daniel Hayes. Not limping. Not screaming. Just grinning. He took one slow step forward, then another. The silence cracked as med personnel moved, carefully. One reached for him. He waved them off. He stood on his own. And when the instructors asked what he had faced inside, he wiped the blood from his hands and smiled. They should have sent more. Daniel didn't remember collapsing. One moment he was standing in the archway, face lit by the glow of disbelief. The next he was weightless, arms pulled aside, voices rushing toward him like a tide. But the pain stayed, anchored. The medbay was silent at first. Not out of respect, they were working too fast for ceremony. A fractured rib had punctured his pleural cavity. His left hand was infected down to the wrist. The skin on the sole of his foot had sloughed off entirely in 2 places, exposing raw tissue. His shoulder was reset under sedation. They drained 90 milliliters of infected fluid from his knee, flushed the joint, and started him on a wide-spectrum antibiotic drip before he was even conscious. When he woke, it was to soft light and the sharp pull of stitched skin along his ribs. His mouth was dry. His body felt like a collection of parts, held together by gauze and exhaustion. But he was alive. And more than that, he was whole. Mostly. A junior medic sat at his bedside, reading quietly from a tablet. She didn't look surprised to see him awake. Just relieved. "Don't try to move," she said. "Your chest drain's still in. You dislocated your shoulder. Took us half an hour to work around the inflammation." He tried to speak. His throat cracked. She handed him a cup with a straw. Water. Cold. Clean. "You broke 2 ribs, partial pneumothorax. We placed a catheter and sealed the pleural breach. You're breathing fine now." He drank slowly. "No need to rush. You'll be here at least 2 weeks," she added. "Longer if the foot wound doesn't close properly." He didn't argue. For the first time since he'd stepped into the labyrinth, he allowed his body to feel weak. He let it rest. The bast of the time and of endeds. The bast adjusteds, wrangly. Outside, the academy was quiet. No celebrations, no announcements. Just silence. Cadets passed each other without the usual jibes. Eyes lingered longer than usual. Conversations stalled when instructors walked by. The trial had never been beaten. Not in records, not in memory. Yet, the cameras had shown every step of it. Every wound, every kill, every fall. The footage hadn't been altered. Couldn't be. The trial's systems were locked from tampering. So, instead, the institution stared at the truth like it was a flame-bright, raw, dangerous to look at for too long. A human had survived. And not by accident. The bast of the time and of endeds. The bast adjusteds, wrangly. 2 days later, Daniel was able to sit up without aid. The catheter was removed. He still needed help to shower. Couldn't lift his right arm past shoulder height without lighting his nerves on fire. The wound in his left foot bled freely with even a few steps. He used crutches. Progress was measured in breaths, in heartbeats. A counselor came in on day 4, standard protocol after exposure to the trial. She was polite, soft-voiced, asked about the hallucination chamber, about the silence room, about the final predator. He answered as best he could. But when she asked, what was the hardest part? He didn't speak right away. He looked past her, toward the small window in the wall. The sky beyond was pale blue. He closed his eyes. Not knowing if it was real, he said at last. At some point, the maze stopped feeling artificial. I stopped thinking about it as a test. She nodded. That was enough. She left without pressing. The bast of the time and of endeds. The bast adjusted, wrangly. His first step without crutches happened on the 9th day. Sharp pain, no stability. But it held. He didn't tell the medics right away, just tested it. Again, then again. By day 11, he was walking unaided, slowly, limping, but upright. They cleared him to leave the medical wing on day 12. He walked out in the same torn uniform he'd entered in, freshly washed, still bearing the slash marks and blood stains that no detergent could lift. The boots had been replaced. But the original pair, the ones soaked in blood, sat in a sealed case now. Not as a trophy. As evidence. Proof. The bast of the time and of endeds. The bast adjusted, wrangly. His first time back in the cadet mess hall, the room fell silent. No one mocked him. No one called him soft. They just watched. He didn't sit at any one table. He moved quietly, took his food, and sat alone. Until the seats filled around him. No words, no ceremony. They just joined him. One by one. Even the predator species cadets, the ones with the mandibles and the scales and the night vision eyes, they came too. Because he'd done what none of them had. And more than that, he'd changed what the trial meant. The bast of the time and stirred at Etapa. They were many of the readiest. They retired the labyrinth 2 weeks later. The AI had been deemed unstable. The predators were deemed too reactive. But everyone knew the truth. The labyrinth hadn't failed. It had just met something it didn't know how to break. They didn't speak of survivors now. They spoke of Hayes protocols. About endurance over aggression. About pain tolerance. Long-form tactics. Cognitive resilience. The curriculum changed. Just a little. Enough. The bast of the time and stirred at Etapa. They were many of the readiest. Daniel didn't stay. He didn't parade. He didn't command. He completed his coursework, quietly, kept training. He volunteered for off-world operations with a resilience corps 2 months later, field medicine, disaster zones, wild gravity. When they asked why he left the academy so soon after rewriting its history, he just said, "There's more than one maze." That was one now. But in the dead of night, sometimes a new cadet would walk the halls alone, eyes wide, ears straining for sound. And they'd come across a pair of boots in a display case. Red. Crusted. A plaque underneath, simple and clean. Cadet Daniel Hayes. Trial survivor. And, below that, engraved in steel, a single sentence. They should have sent more.